There's a moment that comes for everyone. Maybe it happened to you last week, or maybe it's happening right now. You stopped replying immediately. You let the phone ring. You said no without apologizing. And something strange occurred. The people who barely noticed you before suddenly couldn't stop thinking about you. This isn't a dating trick. This isn't about playing games. This is about something far more profound that Carl Jung spent his entire life trying to help people understand. When you stop abandoning yourself to be available for everyone else, you activate a psychological force so powerful it literally changes the energy around you. Let's start with what's probably happening in your life right now. You're the person people call when they need something. The friend who always shows up. The one who drops everything, rearranges their schedule, pushes their own needs aside. And you've told yourself, this is what makes you good, what makes you valuable, what makes you hell. But here's what you've also noticed, and this is the part that hurts. The more available you make yourself, the less people seem to appreciate it. The more you give, the less they value what you offer. You've become like air, absolutely essential, but completely taken for granted. You might have even noticed something darker. The people you're most available for often treat you with the least respect. They cancel plans last minute. They show up late. They ask for favors, but disappear when you need them. And you're left with this gnawing feeling that something is deeply wrong, but you can't quite name it. Jung would tell you that what you're experiencing isn't accidental. It's archetypal. It's a pattern that has repeated itself in human psychology for thousands of years. And understanding why it happens will change everything. Carl Jung introduced a concept he called this persona, the mask we wear to navigate society. It's not fake, exactly. It's the version of ourselves we present to the world, the role we play to fit in and be accepted. For many people, that persona becomes the available one. The helper, the supporter, the person who's always there. And at first, it works. People appreciate it. You feel needed. There's a hit of validation every time someone reaches out, every time you're the solution to someone else's problem. But Jung warned about something crucial. When you over-identify with your persona, when you become nothing more than the mask you wear, you lose contact with your true self. Notice that capital S in Jungian psychology, the self isn't just your personality. It's the totality of who you are, the deep center of your being that exists beyond roles and social performance. When you're constantly available, you're not actually being generous. You're unconsciously sacrificing yourself to maintain your persona, and your psyche knows it. That exhaustion you feel isn't just physical tiredness. It's your inner being screaming that you're betraying something essential. Think about the last time you said yes when everything inside you wanted to say no. Remember that feeling? That slight nausea, that tension in your chest, that voice that whispered, "I don't want to do this"? That was yourself trying to communicate. That was your psychological immune system recognizing a threat. Because here's what Jung understood that most people miss. Constant availability isn't kindness. It's a defense mechanism. It's often rooted in a deep, unconscious fear that if you're not useful, you're not lovable. That if you're not solving problems, you have no value. That if you set boundaries, you'll be abandoned. Now we need to talk about something that might make you uncomfortable. Jung's concept of the shadow, all the parts of ourselves we've rejected, repressed, or refused to acknowledge. When you're chronically available, you're usually running from your shadow. And the shadow of over-availability contains some challenging truths. You might believe you're being selfless, but underneath there's often a hidden transaction. If I'm always there for them, they'll be there for me. If I prove my worth through service, I'll finally feel secure. If I sacrifice enough, I'll earn love. This isn't conscious manipulation. It's an unconscious contract you never agreed to verbally, but enforce emotionally. And here's where it gets painful. When people don't hold up their end of this unspoken bargain, When they don't reciprocate the way you expected, you feel resentful, bitter, used, but you can't express it because that would contradict your persona as the giving, selfless person. So the resentment goes into the shadow, where it grows in the dark. Jung said that we don't actually love people we're always available for in the healthiest way. Often, we're trying to control them. Not in a sinister way, but in a psychological way. If I'm indispensable, they won't leave. If I'm always helpful, they'll need me. And if they need me, I'm safe. This is the shadow speaking. And until you face it, you'll remain trapped in the cycle. The shadow also contains your anger, your frustration, your desire to be selfish sometimes, to put yourself first, to say no without guilt. These are natural, healthy impulses, but you've labeled them as bad, so they lurk in your unconscious, creating anxiety and passive-aggressive behavior. Jung had a theory about psychological energy, what he called libido, though he meant it in a much broader sense than Freud. This energy, he believed, flows where your attention and intention go. When you're constantly available, your energy is always flowing outward, toward others, away from yourself. This creates what Jung would call an energetic imbalance. Your psychological battery is always depleting, never recharging. You become what he described as depleted of libido, not in a sexual sense, but in the sense that your life force, your vitality, your creative energy is constantly being drained. But here's where the magic happens, and it really is like magic once you understand it. When you stop being available, when you create boundaries and protect your energy, something profound shifts. The libido that was flowing outward suddenly redirects. It starts flowing inward, toward yourself. You begin to individuate. Individuation is Jung's term for becoming who you truly are, separate from collective expectations and the roles you've been playing. It's the process of integrating all the scattered parts of yourself into a whole, authentic being. And when this happens, when you start honoring your own needs and rhythms, when you stop performing constant availability, your energy changes. Not metaphorically, Jung believed this was a real, perceptible shift that others can sense, even if unconsciously. Think about someone you know who has strong boundaries, who isn't always available, who seems comfortable saying no. There's something about them, isn't there? A kind of magnetism, a self-possession. You respect them more, even if you can't quite say why. That's what Jung was pointing to. When your energy isn't scattered across 1,000 obligations and other people's needs, it consolidates. It becomes denser, more concentrated, more present. And people feel it. Now we get to one of Jung's most fascinating concepts and how it relates to availability. Projection. Projection is when we unconsciously place aspects of ourselves onto others. We see in them what's actually in us. And this happens constantly in the dynamic of availability. When you're always available, people unconsciously project their own disowned neediness onto you. They don't have to acknowledge their own dependence or vulnerability because you're carrying it for them. You've become the container for everyone else's unmet needs. But when you stop being available, the projection has nowhere to go. Suddenly, people are forced to confront their own needs, their own emptiness, their own responsibility for themselves. And this is deeply uncomfortable for them. This is why people get angry when you start setting boundaries. This is why they call you selfish or say you've changed. They're not actually mad at you. They're mad because you're no longer carrying the parts of themselves they refuse to acknowledge. Jung called this withdrawing projections, and he considered it essential for psychological growth, both yours and theirs. When you stop being constantly available, you force others to individuate too. You're no longer playing the role in their psychological drama that allows them to remain unconscious. And while this might temporarily strain relationships, the relationships that survive this transition become real. They're no longer based on roles and projections, but on two whole people actually seeing each other. The people who truly value you won't disappear when you become less available. They'll respect you more. The ones who drift away, they were never relating to you anyway. They were relating to the function you served, the role you played in their psychological economy. Jung spoke about something he called psychological inflation and psychological deflation. When you're chronically available, you're in a state of deflation. Your sense of self is collapsed. Your boundaries are weak. Your identity is merged with your usefulness to others. But when you stop being available, when you reclaim your time and energy, you begin to experience what Jung would call the return to the self. Your psychological structure strengthens. You inflate back to your natural size, not egotistically inflated, but properly sized. And here's what changes. First, your intuition returns. When your energy is scattered, you can't hear your inner voice. You can't access what Jung called the wisdom of the unconscious. But as you consolidate your energy through boundaries, your intuition sharpens. You suddenly know who to trust, what to do, where to go. Decisions become clearer. Second, your creativity returns. Jung believed creativity required psychological space room for the unconscious to bubble up, for insights to emerge, for new possibilities to form. Constant availability eliminates this space. You're so busy responding to external demands that nothing new can emerge from within. But when you create boundaries, suddenly there's space. Ideas come. Inspiration flows. You start creating instead of just responding. Third, your standards rise. This is crucial. When you're desperate for connection, when your self-worth depends on being needed, you accept treatment you shouldn't accept. You tolerate disrespect. You make excuses for bad behavior. But as you reconnect with yourself, as you taste what it feels like to honor your own needs, you stop tolerating what dishonors you. And this is when everything changes externally. Because people sense standards, they sense self-respect, and they adjust their behavior accordingly or they leave. Either way, you win. Jung warned that individuation isn't comfortable. In fact, he said it often comes with what he called a crisis of the middle life, though it can happen at any age. When you stop being available, you're initiating an individuation crisis, and it will bring up everything you've been avoiding. The fear of being alone, the terror that maybe you're not lovable unless you're useful, the anxiety that if you're not performing constant generosity, you're selfish and bad. These fears will surface, and they'll be loud. Jung would say this is necessary. These fears are the guardians of your false self, the psychological defenses that have kept you trapped. They need to be faced, not because they're true, but because facing them dissolves their power. You might also notice what Jung called synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seem too perfect to be random. You set a boundary, and suddenly an opportunity appears. You say no to one thing, and something better comes along. Jung believed these synchronicities increase during individuation because you're aligning with your true path, and the universe, or the collective unconscious, responds. The people in your life will also go through their own crisis. Some will be angry. Some will test your boundaries. Some will suddenly become very interested in you again. Jung would say they're sensing the shift in your psychological energy, and they're unconsciously trying to restore the old dynamic because it was comfortable for them. This is the test. This is where you either collapse back into old patterns or you hold firm and complete the transformation. So what does life look like on the other side of this shift? What happens when you've stopped being chronically available and you've integrated this new way of being? Jung would say you've moved from persona to self. You're no longer playing a role. You're being who you are. And this creates what he called authentic relationship, connection based on reality rather than projection and role-playing. The new dynamic looks like this. You're selectively available. You're there for people who matter, for causes that align with your values, for moments that feel genuinely important. But you're not available by default. You're not running yourself ragged, trying to be everything to everyone. You notice that your relationships have depth now. Instead of shallow interactions based on what you can do for people, you have real conversations, real presence. The quantity of your connections might decrease, but the quality skyrockets. You experience what Jung called the union of opposites. You can be both kind and boundaried, both generous and self-protective, both connected and independent. These aren't contradictions anymore. They're integrated aspects of a whole self. You also notice that opportunities come to you now. Jung believed that when you're aligned with yourself, you naturally attract what's meant for you. You don't have to chase, convince, or prove. The right people, situations, and experiences find you because your energy is no longer scattered. It's concentrated and clear. Most importantly, you feel different internally. There's a stability that wasn't there before, a groundedness. Jung called this standing on your own feet psychologically. You're not dependent on external validation or constant proof of your worth. You know your value, and it doesn't require constant demonstration. Here's the beautiful paradox Jung would want you to understand. When you stop being available to everyone, you become truly available to the people who matter. When you stop trying to be everything to everyone, you can actually be something real to someone. Chronic availability is actually a form of unavailability. When you're spread that thin, no one gets the real you. They get a tired, resentful, depleted version. They get the persona, the mask, the role, but not the person beneath it. But when you have boundaries, when you protect your energy, when you're selective about where and how you show up, the people you do show up for get all of you. They get your presence, your full attention, your genuine energy. This is true availability, not constant accessibility, but real presence when you're present. Jung also understood another paradox. The less you need people, the better your relationships become. Not because you're cold or distant, but because you're relating from wholeness rather than neediness. You're not trying to fill a void or prove something. You're simply sharing yourself with someone who's sharing themselves with you. This is what mature love looks like. This is what genuine friendship looks like. Not codependence dressed up as closeness, but two individuated people choosing to connect because they want to, not because they need to. So how does this actually work in practice? What does it look like to stop being available in a way that's psychologically healthy rather than reactive or defensive? Jung would say it starts with consciousness. You need to become aware of your patterns. Notice when you say yes, but feel no. Notice when you're performing availability rather than offering genuine help. Notice when you're seeking validation through service. Then comes what Jung called active imagination, dialoguing with the different parts of yourself. Talk to the part that's afraid to set boundaries. Ask it what it's protecting you from. Talk to the part that feels guilty for saying no. Understand its origins. This isn't weakness. It's psychological integration. Next, practice what Jung would call holding the tension of opposites. You can care about someone and have boundaries. You can be kind and unavailable. You can love someone and prioritize yourself. These aren't contradictions. They're mature psychological positions. Start small. Don't respond immediately to every text. Let some calls go to voicemail. Say, "Let me check my schedule," instead of automatically agreeing. Notice what happens, both inside you and in your relationships. You'll feel guilty at first. This is your old persona screaming, terrified of losing its identity. Jung would say, good, guilt means you're changing something important. You'll also notice people's reactions. Some will be confused. Some will be annoyed. And some, the ones worth keeping, will respect you more. What Jung understood, what he spent his entire career trying to communicate, is that psychological transformation is possible. We're not trapped in our patterns. We're not doomed to repeat the same dynamics forever. When you stop being chronically available, you're not just changing a behavior. You're facilitating a deep psychological transformation. You're moving from unconscious living to conscious living, from role-playing to authenticity, from fragmentation to wholeness. This transformation ripples out in ways you can't predict. Your romantic relationships shift suddenly. You attract partners who respect you rather than users who exploit you. Your friendships deepen, the takers leave. The genuine people stay. Your career changes. You stop accepting treatment you don't deserve, and opportunities that honor your worth begin to appear. Even your physical health often improves. Jung understood that psychological stress manifests physically. When you're constantly betraying yourself for others, your body keeps score. But as you individuate, as you honor your boundaries, that stress releases. You also develop what Jung called psychic immunity. You become less reactive to other people's emotions, less controlled by their expectations, less thrown off by their disapproval. Not because you don't care, but because you're rooted in yourself rather than dependent on their approval. This doesn't mean you become cold or selfish. In fact, Jung believed true compassion only becomes possible after individuation. Before that, what looks like compassion is often codependence, control, or unconscious neediness dressed up as care. Real compassion comes from overflow, not from depletion. But Jung would also offer a warning. This path isn't easy, and it's not for the faint of heart. When you stop being available, you will lose people. Some relationships will end. Some people will be angry. You'll be called selfish, accused of changing, told you're not the person they thought you were. And they're right. You're not that person anymore. That person was a role, a performance, a protective persona. You're becoming something more real, and not everyone will like it. You'll also go through periods of loneliness. When you stop filling your life with constant interaction and obligation, there will be space. Empty space, quiet, and at first, this will be uncomfortable. You've been using availability to avoid yourself, to avoid sitting with your own thoughts and feelings. Now you have to face them. Jung called this the dark night of the soul, the period where old structures have collapsed, but new ones haven't fully formed yet. You're in between, and it's disorienting. You might question whether you made the right choice. You might be tempted to go back to old patterns. Don't. This discomfort is the birth canal of transformation. The pain means you're doing something right, not wrong. Carl Jung spent his life studying one fundamental question. What does it mean to become who you truly are? And one of his most profound insights was this: you cannot become yourself while constantly abandoning yourself for others. You cannot individuate while performing a persona that denies your needs. You cannot integrate your shadow while pretending you have no limits. When you stop being available, really stop, not as a manipulation tactic, but as an act of psychological integrity, everything changes. Not because you've learned some trick or strategy, but because you've aligned with something true. Your energy shifts, your standards rise, your relationships transform, opportunities appear. Life starts flowing differently because you're no longer swimming against your own current. The people who are meant for you will meet you in this new space. The ones who aren't will fall away. And while this might hurt, Jung would tell you it's necessary. Every authentic thing that enters your life requires space, and that space is created by releasing what was never truly yours. This isn't about becoming unavailable or isolated. It's about becoming available to the right things, to yourself, to your growth, to relationships that honor rather than deplete you, to a life that reflects your actual values rather than your unconscious fears. Jung believed that every person has a destiny, not a predetermined fate, but a potential self waiting to be realized. And that self cannot emerge while you're busy playing the role of the constantly available person. So here's the invitation. Stop being available. Not to everyone forever, but enough to feel the difference. Enough to reclaim your energy. Enough to remember who you are beneath all the roles and expectations. Watch what happens. Notice the fear that comes up. Face it. Notice the anger in others. Don't absorb it. Notice the space that opens. Inhabit it. This is individuation. This is psychological maturity. This is what it means to become real. And everything, absolutely everything, changes when you do.